Is the Earth really billions of years old? That's what we're going to look at in this video. We've been told that the Earth is very old, as in literally billions of years old. Is this idea backed up by real scientific evidence? Well, let's look at the real facts. One thing we do know is that science is constantly changing. The scientific laws and facts do not change, but the discoveries do. What was known to be true just a year ago has changed. Now, before we look at the idea of the Earth being billions of years old, let's look at why this idea was introduced and why it became so popular. Before Charles Darwin published his theory of evolution, there was a real desire in many scientific circles to get rid of the idea of God or a creator. This had to do with philosophical reasons rather than science. A creator was inconvenient and put limits on what a person could do morally. The geological column was introduced to establish the idea that the Earth was not young, thus questioning the literal idea of a special creation. This geological column was supposed to show tens of millions of years between each layer. This geological column became the foundation or the backbone for the idea that the Earth was old. General ages were assigned to each layer and are still adhered to today to a large degree. The only thing needed to show that the Earth is not old, like we've been told, is to destroy the idea that the geological column has any validity. It is shocking to discover that evolutionists have known for many decades that this geological column is completely false. Any scientist that has investigated this geological column has come to this conclusion. It is well known throughout scientific circles, including evolutionists, geologists, and paleontologists, that there is no scientific credence given to the idea of this geological column. General ages were assigned to each layer and are still adhered to today to a large degree. The only thing needed to do to show that the Earth is not old, like we've been told, is to destroy the idea that the geological column has any validity. Well, it is shocking to discover that evolutionists have known for many decades that this geological column is completely false. Any scientist that has investigated this geological column has come to this conclusion. It is well known throughout scientific circles, including evolutionists, geologists, and paleontologists, that there is no scientific credence given to the idea of this geological column. And let's just take a look at this idea of the geological column. If you'll notice here, you've got the so-called simpler life forms on the bottom, and then as you move up, it gets more complex into the dinosaurs, and then finally into what we would call the modern age. And again, that's an idea, but we're going to see the real problems with this. So the fact is, there is an enormous amount of scientific proof to show just the opposite of this geological column. Although it is quite easy to find this geological column in textbooks, magazines, and in nature shows, virtually all scientists today realize that this chart is fiction. Just plain old fiction. That is not to say that professors, teachers, students, and textbook writers do not believe that it is true, but they seem to be 4 or 5 decades behind the knowledge that is known by the experts in their field. No evolutionist today believes in the validity of the geological column, unless they're just taking the word of the professors or textbooks, of course. The whole idea of the geological column is bogus. then the very background, if the whole idea of the geological column is bogus, then the very backbone and foundation for believing that the Earth is old has evaporated. But that is just the beginning of the problems. If the geological column were actually backed up by scientific evidence, what would that imply? That each layer in the column, or the stratum, is tens of millions of years old. Again, does this really line up with the scientific facts? If we are to believe the Darwinists, the top layer of the Earth grows at approximately the width of a human hair per year. This creates an enormous problem. That would mean that creatures would have to lie around for dozens, hundreds, or even thousands of years, and in fact, in some cases, millions of years, without decaying or being devoured by scavengers. And that, of course, is while they are being fossilized. The scientific evidence that this is even possible on a wholesale basis is simply non existent. This becomes even more impossible when we realize that many fossils were formed instantaneously. A fish is fossilized while eating another fish, or a creature is fossilized while giving birth. Butterflies were completely fossilized, and of course they would decay in just hours or days. Tree fossils have been found sticking through multiple layers of strata, implying that they existed for tens of millions of years while waiting to be fossilized. But it still gets worse. A large majority of these strata, or these layers, are sedimentary, meaning that they were formed by water. Now, water has a tendency to increase the rate of decay significantly in most situations. This would imply that these layers would have been formed very quickly. The theory of evolution has attempted to stomp out the ideas of the past. But is it possible that some of the ideas of the past actually line up with a science much better than the ideas of evolution? For instance, one of the old ideas was that of a worldwide flood. Actually, it is more than just an idea. It has been recorded in over 100 cultures as an actual historical event. But if we look at scientific evidence, the support for this idea becomes overwhelming. If there actually was a worldwide flood, what would we expect to find? Well, that the layers of strata were formed quickly. Billions of fossils have been buried very quickly. Fossils found in basic layers depending on the density and habit, and the creatures living in water would generally be found in the lower parts. We'd find fewer fossils of the more intelligent and more mobile creatures, like the humans. There'd be mixture to some degree in all layers because of the immense turbulence of such an event as a worldwide flood. And the evolutionists, however, would expect the following if their theory was true. The layers of strata where creatures were fossilized slowly. Billions of fossils formed slowly without decaying, at least those that were fossilized as complete creatures. No fossils should ever be found in layers before they had evolved, obviously. Fossils are found only in the order of evolution. Again, if we believe in evolution. And of course, if you believe in evolution, no mixture is allowed whatsoever. But before we look at the evidence to support or contradict these premises, let's examine a common idea that we were taught since grade school, that fossils are old. Now, why do we believe this? Because that is what we learned at school. Before we go any further, it is very important to emphasize a shocking fact. Almost every single fact, chart, and idea that we learned in school about evolution has been disproved literally decades ago. Now, they still remain in our textbooks, You can read Jonathan Wells' book, Icons of Evolution, to see the evidence to back up this statement. Most of us have learned that anyone, including teachers and scientists, can be wrong. So it is important not just to take someone's word for it if we desire to discover the truth about something that is important. So let's look at the second reason that we believe that fossils are old. And that is because the layers that they are in are old. But how do we know that the layers that they are in are old? Well, according to evolutionists, it is by the age of the fossils that are found in that layer. And the argument then goes around and around, and this is, of course, called circular reasoning. So, unless we are to believe this idea of old fossils, because that is what we've been told, or circular reasoning, there is no scientific reason to believe that any fossil is millions of years old. Now, it is true that we've been told for decades that there are ways to measure the age of fossils. Now, that is simply not true unless we can find fossils that can be measured with carbon-14 in it. But that then would show a very young age instead of an old age. That is because this measurement of age is limited to creatures that have lived less than 100,000 years ago. And that is extremely young in evolutionary terms. If we did find fossils with this radioactive carbon in it, that were supposed to be tens of millions of years old, it would prove just the opposite, that fossils are much younger than we are told. So let's take a look at the evidence. There are a number of fossils with carbon-14 in them that were supposed to be over 65 million years old, namely dinosaurs. Well, since the presence of this type of carbon means that the dinosaurs died just a few thousand years ago, then all of the so-called long ages for fossils can no longer be accurate. For more information, go to evosecrets.com, and there will also be a continuation of this video also on YouTube.